Previously on Shadows Born of Light. It has been an honor serving with you, Lord Chaplain. The infestation runs too deep, and the strength of our fighting company is insufficient to completely eradicate the Xenos. I implore you, set aside your honor, and retreat from this accursed place.
Deck clear, my lord.
I want bombardment cannons ready to pummel this accursed station.
Auxiliary distress beacon.
But how? Mikhail is dead, isn't he?
Look, that's where the Hive Ship is.
And it is too convenient to be a trap.
What if there's something far worse that he has discovered?
What are you both implying?
Perhaps Mikhail is trying to tell us something, but I cannot justify spending our remaining strength on speculation.
Then I will go alone. Let it be my penance.
Don't be ridiculous.
Follow me.
Lord Chaplain, why have you brought us here?
Greston, I grant you permission to undertake your penance, but you will need this.
My lord, I cannot accept this honor.
For before them lay an honor bestowed upon few. Terminator armor.
I see the promise of a legendary swordsman within you, and thus I would like you to lead the Terminator squad into battle. Let us meet our deaths with fire in our hearts.
The pile of corpses stank of dying flesh. But there were no carrion insects, for they too were slaughtered by the Tyranids. From the mountain of bodies, a pair of eyes began scanning its surroundings. It waited patiently for a swarm of gargoyles to pass over the mound. The creatures flapped their vile wings, hugging the roof of the cavern as they carried pieces of flesh back towards a large chimney-like structure, the old plasma reactor core. Satisfied that they had left, Mikhail pushed away the corpses he had been using for cover. He shouldered his lasgun, taking a moment to scan the shadows of the old mining town for signs of Tyranid activity. Aside from the distant chittering of beasts flooding out towards the station, the expansive cavern was quiet. Carved into the core of the adamantine asteroid, the Red Rock Guild used to call this town home, as they extracted the precious minerals from the ice deposits around them. At the far end, the plasma reactor, the beating heart of the guild, lay dormant. Though the radioactive blue light that shone from the machine had long since died, an etheric green glow emanated in its place. But even the majesty of the reactor was set in the shadow of a far larger behemoth. The Hive Ship, its body still half frozen in ice. It weakly whined, its body still trapped in melting ice, its organs not fully functional. Swarms of rippers and ravenors gnawed away at the thick glaciers trapping it. That was where Mikhail's quarry was. Satisfied that none of the beasts had noticed him, he began limping down into the shadow of a ruined building. His wounds had become infected, but while he still had life, he would serve his chapter. He was not sure if Chaplain Exantis and the other Space Marines were still contending for the fate of the station. But he had a duty he knew he needed to do, and he would not relent till it was done. Michal entered what looked to be an old administrative office. Pain racked his body with every step. He had to occupy his mind with holy scriptures to ignore the pain, a technique he had learned while undergoing his Astartes trials. He mentally chanted them over and over as he ventured deeper into the hollowed asteroid complex. The pain became more and more pronounced, but before it overwhelmed him, a horrifying shriek startled him. He dived into cover behind a desk and hefted his laser gun. It came from the reactor. A malign presence gnawed at his mind as the unfortunate soul slipped into the embrace of a psychic death. Michal clenched his chittering teeth, an unnatural dread threatening to overwhelm his sanity. He had to slay the beast. It took an hour for him to carefully crawl towards the reactor, but he finally reached the foot of the giant structure, covered in dying flesh to camouflage his scent. He could hear roars of warriors, gaunts, and other beasts within. And then another shriek was heard. From the air vent high above the central coolant pool, Michal could see the unfortunate human being lifted up by two disgusting tentacles. A neurotyrant spun the seneschal upside down, as if it were an infant inspecting a toy. She kicked and screamed, desperately attacking the beast's tentacles in vain. It wrapped another set of tentacles around the defiant officer, disabling her resistance with ease. It brought her face to face so that she stared directly into its hideous maw. She screamed again. Suddenly, a burst of psychic energy emanated from the neurotyrant, causing the air around it to visibly boil. The seneschal howled in agony, her flesh fizzling away from her skull as the beast siphoned away her life force. No, not just her life force, her consciousness as well. Michal clutched his ears in pain. The pain of psychic assault, brutalizing his brain. Blood oozed out as veins burst. And then it stopped. The seneschal was now a limp sack of flesh, rendered pale gray, as if her very soul had been sucked from her body. The neurotyrant smacked its lips, satiated with the soul of the unfortunate officer. It tossed her body to its feet, where it was immediately set upon by Ripper swarms, torn apart within seconds, as if it were eaten by piranhas. At its feet, however, a large, cephalopod-like creature Michal did not recognize wriggled its tentacles expectantly at the Rippers. Immediately after they had stripped the body of flesh, the unknown creature opened its gaping maw, revealing a beak full of wicked sharp razors. The Rippers willingly leapt to their deaths as the creature clamped its teeth down upon them, crushing them in a shower of blood and biomatter. It swallowed, the nutrients passing through its long exposed guts and into a bloated sack, which could only be its stomach. The creature let out an agonizing scream as its stomach began to bloat unnaturally quickly. Liquid oozed from its skin, its flesh bulging. Then a talon burst out from its stomach, ripping it open and spilling a disgusting bile over the tainted floor. A Von Ryan's leaper stumbled out, slashing away the umbilical cord connected to it. The unknown creature, it seemed, had finally been identified. The chapter's repositories had described such a creature, which serves as an incubator and birthing chamber, as a Norn Queen. Such would explain the sudden explosion in the Tyranid population. The mysterious disappearances over the years was no coincidence. It had been feeding, waiting, and spawning a swarm to overrun the station. At its feet, Zephanius cowered in a ball. The Archbishop's white robes had been stained with all manner of colors from the vile fluids of the Norn Queen. The neurotyrant turned to him and plucked him from within a crowd of terrified priests. He shrieked, knowing what was to come. Michal slid a cracked grenade out from his belt. He was not sure it would kill the beast, but he had to try. The death of the Archbishop would provide the perfect distraction. But suddenly, the neurotyrant snapped its head in Michal's direction, its keen senses detecting the movement of the crack grenade. It roared, and soon Michal heard something crawling rapidly through the vent behind him. Its clambering sounded too large to be in a vent so small. Michal had to fight it in the open. He rammed the butt of his weapon into the vent grill. The thing was getting closer. He slammed his weapon into it again. It came loose, and the metal grating fell to the floor with a thunderous clang. Michal leapt out of the air vent, spinning around and firing his laser gun just as the beast burst forth behind him. He fired. Once, twice, and then suddenly he was slammed into the ground, his laser gun flying across the room out of reach as a lictor pounced upon him. Michal struggled, pointlessly punching the beast's arm. But it was not as fragile as a baseline human. The lictor hoisted him up and slammed him back into the ground again. Michal felt bones snap, his hip feeling the force of a sledgehammer crashing into it. He wanted to move, but his body did not obey him. The lictor dragged him along as it sauntered to the neurotyrant. It threw him at its feet as the tyrant turned its attention back to Zephanius. The air around the tyrant began to convulse again, but this time, a psychic voice pierced Michal's mind. The foul creature was communicating telepathically in Low Gothic. Michal's gut sank. This was an unprecedented moment. Tyranids had never communicated with humans before.
Delusion.
Get out!
The terrified Archbishop screamed.
This is what you have wrought, Archbishop.
The lictor stomped on Michal again, crushing his arm under his chest. He did not feel the pain, though. Too much of it had made his senses numb.
Believe. Manipulate.
Curse you, beast!
Zephanius spat at the creature. It did not flinch or even understand what the human was doing. Michal had no sympathy left for the Archbishop. He had reaped exactly what he had sown. As the beast hoisted Zephanius closer, Michal fumbled around his cloak, his broken arm barely grasping a tiny device. Chaplain Exantis needed to be made aware of this evolving threat. The Norn Queen had to die, lest a splinter fleet spawn. He pushed its activation rune.
Imperium. Become one.
The air began to boil once more as the neurotyrant unleashed its psychic siphon. Zephanius began howling, his soul leaving his body. His white robes turned a sickly yellow and black as the Archbishop's vital fluids spilled out and boiled. He flailed in violent agony, like a prey animal finally dragged from its hole by the things it refused to face. And soon Zephanius was no more than a lifeless corpse. The neurotyrant dropped his body, and Ripper swarms set upon it. The nascent Norn Queen waved its tentacles again as the tyrant turned to Michal. Adrenaline shot through his veins. He wanted to struggle, but his broken body had no more strength left in him. He grunted in frustration. The soul was willing, but his flesh was weak. just as in his Astartes trials. Tentacles wrapped around his ankles, and he was suspended in the air, the tyrant drawing him ever closer. The stench of its foul breath, like that of thrice-rotten corpses, invaded his lungs. He gazed defiantly at the beast, but it had no eyes to stare into. The air convulsed again. Michal wriggled his working left hand free.
Die, beast!
Michal hurled the crack grenade at the tyrant. It roared in surprise and hurled Michal away, trying to avoid the explosive. But it was too close for it to react fast enough. Michal tumbled to the ground several feet away from the beast. A cloud of fire engulfed where the neurotyrant once floated, and debris rained down around him. Blood and chitin poured down like rain. Michal turned his gaze toward it, but the neurotyrant floated defiantly before him, unscathed. Instead, a tyrant guard creature roared in pain. Half of its face had been blown off. It stumbled and fell before rising to its feet. Two more of its brood surrounded it. They roared at Michal, brandishing their crushing claws, and charged towards him. The Master of Whispers closed his eyes. It was over. He had served to the best of his ability, and he commended his soul to the Emperor, lifting one final prayer for salvation. But even as he silently uttered those words, his skin tingled, his hair standing on end. The air began to vibrate, and he saw golden orbs of light snowing upon him. Then, in a violent bang, a hulking black object suddenly materialized in front of him. His eardrums popped as the familiar sound of bolter fire barked shortly after.
Get behind me!
The familiar voice of Greston broke through his deafened eardrums. A giant boot slammed down in front of him as a massive suit of Terminator armor answered his plea for salvation. Greston opened fire at the Tyrant Guard, as did Cedric and Diedrich. They raised their crushing claws to protect their bodies, the rounds plinking harmlessly off their thick armor. Michal wondered if he had already entered the afterlife, surprised that Greston would be the one to defend him. Another shadow loomed over him, but he already knew who it was.
I have failed you.
No. You have done well, Michal. This time, I will not fail you.
Exantis Crozius crackled as he joined the formation of Terminators. He marched behind Greston, who raised his power sword at the Neurotyrant.
This will be the final battle for Void Station Sheol. A nascent Norn Queen has been feeding and growing within the Void Station ever since Zephanius first stumbled upon the mining dock. The sin of the Archbishop has finally been dragged into the light by Michal, and it falls upon Chaplain Exantis to bring the judgment of the Emperor upon this heresy. The mission is Unstable Archaeotech from the Pariah Nexus Crusade mission pack. There are only 2 objective markers that these forces shall contend over. The Black Templars have brought to bear a powerful Melta warhead capable of burning through the thickest of ships' hulls to destroy the Norn Queen. While the psychic might of the Neurotyrant has coalesced into a field of deadly warp energy, that would paralyze every living soul aboard to be consumed by the Tyranids. Each player scores by holding an objective throughout the game, but also score at the end of the game as they use actions to attempt to push their payloads into their opponent's territory, offering victory points depending on where the payloads detonate. Chaplain Exantis has mustered all that is left of the fighting company's battle strength into a righteous crusaders detachment, taking the Uphold the Honor vow. He leads a Terminator squad helmed by Greston and consisting of all the surviving sword brethren. They are supported by Honored Brother Vedrand and Honored Brother Baron, the two Redemptor Dreadnoughts attached to the company, with Sergeant Lothair and his infiltrators bringing up the rear. At the battle line is a squad of 10 Primaris Crusaders led by Brother Emric, who has recovered from his wounds after Greston led them into an ambush. Last but not least is a squad of 5 Intercessors to provide anti-infantry fire to support the payload's advance. Guarding the Norn Queen is a swarm using the Invasion Fleet Detachment, choosing the Swarming Instinct's hyper-adaptation for sustained hits against infantry. A Nero Tyrant serves as the extension of the Norn Queen's synaptic might. It leads a squad of 3 Zoanthropes, granting them a +1 to hit buff and providing range firepower to complement the melee might of the squad of 3 Tyrant Guard, the Guardians of the Norn Queen. The Broodlord that humbled Greston makes its return, leading a squad of 5 Gene Stealers, who are supported by 2 different Carnifexes, armed in a pure melee configuration with scything talons. A unit of 5 Barbgons holds the back line, while a squad of 10 Termagons and 10 Hormagons form the vanguard of the swarm, with another 10 Gargoyles perched in the cave networks above the reactor core, waiting for an opportunity to deep strike and contest control over the Templars' Melta warhead. The Tyranid sees the initiative and goes first. From the darkness, the Gene Stealers scout forward. And so too do the Zealous Crusaders, taking cover in the ruins of a warehouse. The hive mind restrains the Hormagons, preserving their strength behind the complex walls. The Tyrant Guard barrel forward towards Mikal. As the eldritch mass of tentacles hovers forward, projecting their psychic might. The warriors slink into cover behind the walls, ever watchful for Brother Vedrand's macroplasma. Millennia of digested experience have taught them this. The Termagants advance in support. The Carnifex barrels forward and lets out a reverberating challenge towards the Redemptor Dreadnought. The Barbgons remain stationary as the Neurotyrant channels their mental capacity to move the payload. The Neurotyrant turns its psychic gaze towards Brother Vedrand. But with Armor of Contempt, the foul energies dissipates against the Redemptor's hull and ends the Tyranid's first turn. The initiative passes to the Templars. Mikal just barely manages to drag his broken body into the corner of a ruined building. He is no longer combat effective, and would only prove a burden to the Templars. Greston marches at the head of the Terminator Squad. They are the bulwark that protects the Melta warhead. The intercessors break from cover, with one of their number still within remote operation range of the payload. The Infiltrator Squad 2 steadily advances behind it. The Crusader Squad shuffles slightly to improve their cover. Brother Baron and Brother Vedran march forward as the iron fist of the strike force. And Brother Vedran threatens the Tyranid's southern flank, his sensors detecting a target-rich environment. He unleashes his defensive weapons into the Termagants and overcharges his macro plasma to the Carnifex. The scorching heat wounds the monster. It refuses to make a blistering assault move, which would shorten the Redemptor's charge range. The intercessors unload to the Zoanthropes. But only deal one wound. The Terminators split fire. Brother Vedran fails his charge by a single inch. He is in a precarious position as the Tyranid's second turn begins. The psychic field glides forward, and a Neuraloid attaches to the Tyrant Guard. They clamber behind the chitin spines, staging for a 9-inch charge to the Terminators, while remaining obscured from range fire. The warriors catch the scent of the intercessors and break from cover, intent on ripping apart the Marines with their bone swords and ranged weapons.
Tyranid warriors, turn away those talons with your steel!
The Carnifex rushes forward to exploit Vedran's failed charge. It will not make the same mistake. The Zoanthropes float forward, forcing the Hormigons to use their mental capacity to move the psychic field forward with an action. The Gene Stealers continue lurking in the darkness, while the Carnifex behind them moves into charge range of Brother Baron, presenting both Redemptors a deadly melee threat. The Barbgons bombard the intercessors, but the Marines take no wounds, their armor shrugging off all the blows, but are now slowed by the mess of tangled barbs. Psychic energy coalesces around the Neurotyrant as it split fires. Its psychic scream brings down a Terminator, which fails its feel no pain rolls, while the Zoanthropes fire upon Brother Vedran, who fails both saves, piercing his torso through the sarcophagus, dealing an immense 11 damage after damage reduction. The warriors split fire, their devourers going into the intercessors, and the venom cannon into the Terminators. The Carnifex rears backwards and successfully charges the Redemptor. The warriors storm into the intercessors, still firing their devourers on the way in. The Tyrant Guard just barely fail their charge, even after spending a command point to reroll. The other Carnifex barely makes it into engagement range, but that distance is all that it needed. the impetuous Greston initiates a countercharge onto the warriors, using heroic intervention and just barely making it in. The Templars are eager to put down the Xenos for daring to charge their brothers. The Carnifex strikes first. Its talons piercing Vedran's skull, killing the ancient honored Marine.
No!
The warriors bring down the Grenadier. On the southern flank, there is another clash between Carnifex and Redemptor, but the melee plays out differently. The Redemptor strikes back, killing the Carnifex. It is time to unleash fury, as it is now the Templars' fight activation. The Intercessor's melee prowess does 2 wounds to the warriors, as the Terminators pile in and completely annihilate the warriors. Tyranid melee has faltered, allowing the Templars to gain the upper hand as they proceed into their second turn. Squad Lothair provides covering fire as the warhead rolls on forwards. Brother Baron marches forward, as do the Terminators, who now move into guaranteed charge range of the Tyrant Guard. The Nero Tyrant is furious at this and fires Overwatch at the Terminators with its psychic scream. It rolls a low number of shots, but still takes 2 wounds off a Terminator. The Crusaders march forward towards the Tyrant Guard, bellowing zealous war cries, impatient to meet the fury of melee combat, attempting the same maneuver as the Terminators. The Intercessors perform a bounding fire and maneuver to get into remote operation range of the warhead. They cannot allow the Carnifex to charge them and consolidate onto the objective. Wings flutter from the caverns above as the gargoyles perform rapid ingress, pushed out to 12 inches because of the infiltrators' omni-scramblers. But their confounding speed threatens to take the objective from the Templars. The Redemptor split fires into the Zoanthropes and Barbgons. The very existence of these Tyranids offends him greatly. He makes a furious 11-inch charge.
For the Emperor! Charge!
Seeing this, the Crusader squad lifts its suppressive fire and also charges the Tyrant Guard.
Cleanse the monstrosity! Ah!
Though making a successful charge, the difficult terrain prevents them from moving any further, dashing Cedric's hope of trying to tie down the Neuro Tyrant with a pile-in and consolidate maneuver. They pummel 2 of them, and the Crusaders take out the last and manages to consolidate into the Nero Tyrant.
Their sorcery could swallow us all!
Though the inexorable advance of the Templars is brutal, crafty maneuvering from the Tyranids ensures that both sides still threaten the other's objectives. And it is now a matter of who will falter first. Though the Templars have done more damage, the battle is far from decided. Will the Tyranid counterattack prove effective? It remains to be seen as the Tyranids progress into turn 3. The Tyranids complete their action. Which inadvertently allows the Templars to hold the objective. A well-timed shadow in the warp, combined with Synapse and the Neuro Tyrant's debuff, causes the Crusaders to fail their battle shock test, allowing the Tyranids to retain control over the objective. The Tyranids need as many bodies as they can to obtain superior objective control, even if it costs them firepower. The oil-drenched Carnifex marches towards the Intercessors.
Give them no ground, brothers!
The Gargoyles advance onto the Templars' objective. These crafty creatures also intend to use their bodies as living roadblocks, preventing the Templars from being in control range, unless they completely annihilate every single gargoyle. This causes the Templars' action to fail. The warhead will not move next turn. The air around the Neuro Tyrant begins to boil again. Causing one to boil inside his armor. And deals 2 wounds to Brother Diedrich, leaving him on 1 wound. The Carnifex suddenly switches targets and charges the Terminators. A surprised Diedrich barely turns in time to face the monster, but it is too late to react. The Broodlord and its Gene Stealers charge the Redemptor and the Assault Intercessors, who are within range of the objective, and thus will trigger the Gene Stealer's ability to reroll once to wound against them. 2 Gene Stealers take out 2 Crusaders, but the Broodlord rolls poorly and does no damage to the Redemptor, which manages to crush 2 Gene Stealers with its power fist. The Carnifex lunges towards Brother Diedrich. Its talons pierce his primary heart. It lifts him into the air and throws him backward. Greston bellows in rage, as does Cedric and the Lord Chaplain. Lunging, striking, and parrying the creature, completely pummels the Carnifex into oblivion. The tactical state of this battle is exactly why the Black Templars' doctrine emphasizes melee combat above all, as through sheer tenacity and masterful swordsmanship, the Templars have almost seized control over the Tyranid's objective. But they do not fully control it yet. The fury of the Swarm is unrelenting, as the Tyranids confound the Templars' plans at every turn. The Swarm throwing away their lives to delay and wrestle control of the objectives away from the humans. This bloody battle continues as the Templars take their 3rd turn. Victory is close at hand as Cedric turns back towards the Neuro Tyrant. They must bring down the Neuro Tyrant this turn. The Intercessors and the Infiltrators turn towards the Gargoyles. Mikal becomes conscious again and crawls towards the warhead. The combined fire of the Crusaders and the Terminators decimates the Hormigons. The Intercessor's new balanced data slate ability almost annihilates the gargoyles. The Terminators charge first, attempting to provoke Overwatch, and the Neuro Tyrant obliges. Cedric falters as his skin boils, his faith protecting him with a feel no pain roll. The Terminators make it into engagement range, and now the Crusaders make their charge, with no fear of Overwatch. Exantis steps up to the Neuro Tyrant, issuing an epic challenge. The Broodlord tears at Brother Baron, who catches its claw and crushes it. Greston bisects the Zoanthrope as Cedric pummels the Barbgon. The two commanders finally come face to face. The Neuro Tyrant unleashes Eldritch Blast against Exantis, dealing no damage. Then Exantis strikes the beast. He continues to pummel the beast's broken body. Again and again and again. The Norn Queen convulses, knowing it has lost this battle. Psychic energy coalesces around the nascent Norn Queen as it musters all its might into its psychic potential in one last desperate attempt to defend itself. At the end of the battle, the payloads detonate in no man's land, and the Templars have just barely managed to claim a victory by holding their objective marker in the last turn, which allows them to take a 5-point lead, resulting in a Pyrrhic Black Templars victory.
The air grew thick with oppressive psychic pressure as the Norn Queen convulsed again. Exantis' shield crackled with tortured energy as sparks ignited upon Greston and Cedric's armor. All three held firm, using their bodies to shield the Melta warhead as it trudged forward behind them. Then it stopped. The Norn Queen had exhausted itself. Cedric and Greston already had their weapons trained on it, and they emptied their entire ammo reserves into the creature. Bolt rounds ripped shreds out of the Norn Queen's exposed flesh as it howled in pain, before throwing up a psychic barrier with all its remaining might.
Where's the warhead?
Exantis bellowed. Then their comms crackled.
Damn it! Detonator severed!
Greston reported. The lumbering cart lurched to a halt behind them, as Sergeant Lothair and his infiltrators took over suppressive fire from the Terminators. Exantis marched up to the warhead. Its control panel was shattered, its circuits still in flames from the psychic attack. Greston turned to Exantis.
Get Brother Tormund here.
That'll take 20 minutes at least.
We don't have 20 minutes.
Then I will manually detonate it.
Michal coughed as he limped towards the Space Marines. He clutched his bleeding abdomen. His skin had turned deathly blue from a loss of blood, while his arm had become a sickly yellow. His wounds had finally caught up to him.
I am dead anyway, Lord Chaplain.
Squad Lothair's fire waned. As they reloaded, several more Tyrant Guard leapt out from behind the Norn Queen. Cedric turned and rushed to meet them in melee, together with the Crusader squad. Yet above them, more gargoyles swooped down from their caves in the asteroid. Mikal opened the panel on the warhead, clutching 2 severed wires with shaking hands.
Then die with honor, Mikal.
Greston gave the man a curt nod, before he too joined the melee. Exantis marched up to his old friend. Mikal shook his head.
Thank you for believing in me again, one last time.
It was an honor fighting alongside you, brother.
Mikal bowed his head. Tears welled up, his soul finally receiving affirmation long denied.
Go!
Mikal coughed as the shadows morphed into the shape of gaunts and warrior beasts. The entire swarm was flooding into the mining dock now.
Brothers, fall back.
At Exantis' command, what remained of the Black Templars' force initiated a fighting retreat back towards the entrance. The chaplain turned towards the fallen brother Vedrend, his chassis broken beyond repair, and whispered a frustrated prayer.
We will return for you, brother.
Mikal slumped next to the warhead, still clutching the detonation wires. He turned his head towards the retreating Templars, with the swarm hot on their heels. Exantis turned around, making eye contact with Mikal one last time. He nodded, bidding an unspoken farewell. To his surprise, Greston too nodded in his direction. Mikal felt the ground shudder as a guttural growl echoed in his bones. A Tyrant Guard approached him, raising its crushing claws.
May the Emperor's light obliterate your kind.
Mikal uttered his final words before joining the wires together. The entire station reverberated as a heat wave rushed out from the mining dock. Chaplain Exantis smashed aside a homagaunt that leapt at him, trying desperately to keep pace with the Crusader squad. But the bulk of his Terminator armor hampered his mobility. They were nowhere close to the boarding tube, but the inferno behind them was rolling forwards too quickly.
Brace yourselves!
He barked. Exantis slammed his shield in front of him. Greston and Cedric spun around, just as the storm of fire washed over them. Their armor sparked and bubbled as the ground beneath them tore, as the depressurization ripped the foundations of the station apart. Exantis saw Void Station Sheol die from the inside out. The weight of its sin finally bursting forth as blinding light engulfed them all. A single flame lights the darkness of the Reclusium, spreading its light across the high walls of this most holy of places. Etched across them were the names of generations of Black Templars who had fallen in battle. Yet on a tiny plinth at its base was etched an unusual name. Mikal Keygard, Master of Whispers. Chaplain Exantis gazed intently at the candle that lay in front of it. It was the only candle there. No other space marine came to honor a hero not of Astartes stock. Yet none would question Exantis' decision. This was his Reclusium, and he was convicted to set this precedent. The chaplain uttered a silent prayer. As he turned to leave, armored footsteps echoed behind him. Another tiny light banished the darkness, as a space marine clad in Phobos armor approached with a candle in his hands. The marine inclined his head as he passed by Exantis, dropping to a knee to place his candle in front of Mikal's memorial. The marine, too, uttered a prayer before rising to his feet. There was an awkward silence as both he and Exantis gazed down at the flames.
I thought Squad Lothair had already departed.
Exantis suddenly broke the silence.
New orders, my lord.
Replied Greston.
Special assignment.
I see.
The two marines said nothing to each other after. Exantis turned to leave again.
Lord Chaplain.
The chaplain stopped in the doorway. He turned to Greston.
Thank you for advocating for me.
Leonis believes in you, Greston. And so do I.
I will not disappoint you, my lords.
I know you won't.
Greston nodded, bowing his head as the chaplain's words pierced into his soul.
Did I ever tell you that I personally failed Mikal?
Greston raised his eyes towards Exantis in confusion.
He committed an unforgivable blunder while he was still an aspirant. He had pity on a young gang lookout, saw the suffering in his eyes. So he spared him, even though we warned them not to. And when the squad returned the next day, they were ambushed and almost wiped out. Leading that ambush was the very same lookout he had spared. The gang had him on a leash, severed the poor boy's tongue for betraying them. I convinced the cadre to step in before any more aspirants died. But I could not allow such naivety to go unpunished.
Then why did you spare him?
I saw a fire in his eyes to right all the wrongs of this world. And it reminded me of myself. That is why I gave him a second chance. And that is why he has finally earned a place among us.
Exantis turned back to the plinth, a small memorial among legends.
I didn't know.
You will. Soon enough.
The flames from the two candles flickered as Exantis's marching threatened to snuff them out.
But what if...
You will.
Exantis steps onto the elevator.
Unlike others.
The chamber erupts in a deafening uproar. The din of religious fervor rose higher than the symposium ceiling as hundreds of ecclesiarchal priests leapt to their feet, shouting and cursing at Exantis. A resplendent cardinal sat high above him on a magnificent cedar throne, clad in pristine ivory robes adorned with resplendent linings. He slammed his silver gavel.
Silence!
The chamber fell silent.
Those are childish accusations, Space Marine.
Open your eyes, Cardinal.
You shame your chapter.
And you shame your Emperor.
The Cardinal leapt to his feet in unbridled rage, and so does the crowd. They hurled insults and curses upon him. So deafening are their denigrations that the rockcrete walls shake.
Arrest him!
A squad of battle sisters surround Exantis, snarling at the supposed heretic with bolters trained on him. But the chaplain's gaze remains affixed firmly onto the Cardinal.
I witnessed the death of Sheol.
And I personally blessed it.
And there we have it.
Exclaims a voice behind the Cardinal. The startled priest draws his pistol, but it is swiftly parried by the mysterious visitor.
Go, go, go!
The doors to the chamber burst open as a contingent of armored warriors floods into the hall with weapons raised, corralling the terrified crowd into submission. The Cardinal's guards trained their autoguns on the intruders until they too were held at gunpoint.
Stand back! Get back!
Dirty black boots sullied the holy ground as a man clad in a great black robe sauntered up to the cardinal. The holy man opened his mouth to curse his assailant, but then a rosary of obsidian beads flashed in front of his face, and then his countenance fell into absolute dread, for it bore the unmistakable black and red eye of the Emperor's most holy Inquisition.
Thank you for your confession, my friend.
The Inquisitor pats the Cardinal on the shoulder.
What is the meaning of this?
Oh, you know very well what this is about.
The Cardinal's lips trembled, struggling to find an answer.
Let me ask you one simple question, Cardinal. Did you know of the Tyranids before you blessed Sheol?
No.
Careful now. Want to change your answer?
The Cardinal did not answer.
I thought so.
The inquisitorial stormtroopers corral the thousands of shivering priests out of the auditorium like a human sea. Gone was their bravado just a moment ago. Chaplain Exantis watched with indignance as the Cardinal was dragged out in chains, screaming in terror at the fate which awaited him.
Well, my friend, you played your part superbly.
The Inquisitor sauntered up to Exantis, playfully twirling his sword along the way.
With all due respect, Inquisitor, I am not your friend.
The Inquisitor chuckled.
Oh, such cruelty. Even after you petitioned me for help.
We are even now. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave.
So soon? Don't you want to execute him yourself?
Exantis marches out of the auditorium as the Inquisitor waves after him. The chaplain does not turn around as the roar of a descending thunderhawk drowns out the cacophony of lasfire and the screams of dying priests. As the chaplain stepped into the evening sunlight, his gaze drifted to a grand golden sculpture depicting the God Emperor of mankind. Rays of orange cast its radiant light upon it, causing it to sparkle with a vibrant sheen. How ironic it was then that as the sun began to set, the radiant Emperor casted a long shadow over a carving of the Aquila at its feet. Exantis stared at this image, even as the mighty bulk of the Thunderhawk obscured the last remaining light this day would provide. Exantis frowned, for the holy benediction now exposed a terrible truth. Only in shining light can thou witness darkest shadow, for shadows are always born of light.